Hello, good evening. Welcome to another Caramoor conversation. My name is Kathy Schumann. I'm the artistic director of Caramoor, and we've just been watching a wonderful documentary about the artist Trimpin called The Sound of Invention by Peter Esmond. And we have Trimpin, the artist featured in this film, with us here today, along with Stephan Moore, who is the curator of sound art at Caramoor. We've been doing sound art at Caramoor for a number of years now, and this summer just unveiled a new piece by Trimpin, permanent piece on our grounds called In C. So prompted by this, we decided to stream this wonderful documentary, which is available all summer long. And I will turn it over to Stephan to lead tonight's discussion. And please, if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask Trimpin about the film or anything else about his work, please do send in your questions in the live chat. I'll turn it over to you, Stephan.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Welcome to this opportunity to speak with Trimpin here. As Kathy mentioned, we've been doing sound art here. Our first exhibition of sound art was in 2014. And part of that initial exhibition, we also had Trimpin here as part of that, creating a piece for us called The Piano House, which those of you who were hanging out with us back in 2014 may remember. And so Trimpin is really part of the story of sound art at Caramoor from the very beginning. And tonight, we're hoping to field questions from you about any piece of this, anything from the film, anything about about In C, the new piece, anything about the Piano House, or whatever is on your mind. So I will be monitoring your questions as they come through the chat. So please feel free to type something in, and maybe I will kick things off with the first question. Just sort of a general question for Trimpin, and all of the work that we saw in the film, the Piano House back in 2014 at Caramoor, In C. What strikes me about all of these pieces, and is a sort of a signature part of your work, Trimpin, is that you don't work with amplified sound. You work only with sound that is made by objects, or I guess very rarely with amplified sound. So that part of your work has always fascinated me. It seems like you're fascinated by the material creation of sound, and I wondered if there's any insight for us that you could have about why your work has that identifying characteristic.
Well, it goes way back when I was probably 9 or 10 years old. I was collecting tube radios, and I took all the chassis off and stacked them all on top, and I connected all the changes of the stations, like the capacitors, which was a huge mechanical capacitor device. And I hooked all the wheels from about 10 or 15 tube radios together. And when I had one big wheel, and when you turn this one big wheel, all the radio stations would change on these tube radios simultaneously. But of course, it was like more short wave sounds, like Morse code sounds, high pitch sounds. So you almost could do a musical scratching sequence with all these tube radios sound. And so this was kind of a fascination of manipulating sound. But then at the same time, I was starting to learn brass, practicing brass instruments. And I was in particular interested in the monophonic sound of a trumpet or a trombone. I was starting to add a second bell, to make the monophonic instrument a polyphonic instrument. So this was the first kind of experimentation of manipulating acoustical sounds. And this was kind of the way I thought, I want to investigate more what happens when you just use acoustical sounds and not amplified sounds.
Okay, so you went from an electronic, actually starting with the electronic amplified sound with the radio, and then moving into the acoustic realm. And for you, that was where the interest was. So you went over in that direction and sort of haven't really looked back, I guess.
Right, because at this time, there was so much going on in experimentation, like Musik Concrete and then the first electronic sounds from the 50s and 60s, Stockhausen. And so this was definitely an interest, but I was more interested in going into the other direction to investigate what you can do by manipulating acoustical sounds.
Okay, so well, great. I'm aware, through this film, but also through your own descriptions of the numerous shapes that kind of experimentation has taken. Maybe the next thing to ask you about is the piano house piece. With the one that we had at Caramoor initially, that piece was designed to slowly destroy itself, and it sort of was I guess you could say kind of a planned obsolescence, a planned end to that piece was built into it from the beginning. And I'm sure there are some folks who are joining us who might remember that piece being at Caramoor. Maybe say a few things about how the piano house worked, what inspired it, and what made you think about that piece as being one you'd like to build at Caramoor.
Well, I knew the piece is outdoors, outside, and usually piano doesn't like any kind of climate changes. And I knew when I would use pianos, it would sound every day a little bit different. And this was an intention that visitors, when they would come back to Caramoor, it would actually sound different than they experienced it the last time they heard and saw it, because it's like for your ears and eyes, because you're actually watching how everything works, how sound actually is moving through the space. You are actually watching at the same time and using your visual component and your oral component at the same time. So with the piano house, it was intended to destruct itself. There was a big wooden saw on the top, cutting into the roof of the piano. Basically, it was like a house built with 6 pianos, 4 pianos for the 4 walls, and 2 pianos for the roof. So and each piano was prepared in a certain way, where hammers were banging on the strings or on the soundboard or bowing the strings, and so I knew eventually the pianos would kind of dissolve themselves because the glue doesn't like any moisture or rain, so slowly it would fall apart. And unfortunately, it didn't fall apart in the first year. So then we had the chance to put it up a second year. And then the second year, it was time at the end of the season to get rid of it. But it never collapsed. And I hoped eventually it would collapse. But I guess we would need a third year to wait for the collapse. But it was time to to depart from this idea.
It did, because I remember listening to the piece so many times over the course of those 2 years. It's definitely true that the piece changed its sound drastically over the course of that time. And what was interesting to me is that you had written compositions. There's almost two parts to the piece. One was the building, the physical structure of it, but then there was this whole other process of creating a way of composing pieces for this instrument, so that we would be able to, when the audience would come up, they would press a button and they would listen to one of these many compositions that were in the piece. And I remember being able to go back and listen to the same composition multiple times and hearing everything change really drastically each time, as everything slowly fell apart and detuned. So I one of the things I remember thinking a lot is how good the piece sounds, not only at the very beginning, but even in mid decay. When you're writing pieces for this piano house instrument to play, how were you planning to incorporate the sounds of decay, or the sounds of the instrument falling apart? That seems like such a hard thing to keep in mind, or to something hard thing to anticipate.
Well, first of all, the piano strings will get out of tune, and they go all out of tune together. So slowly, like the strings have less tensions because of the wood. The wood gets kind of softer, and slowly the strings getting totally out of tune. And I knew slowly certain parts would fall apart, or just degenerate through the weather condition. And this was all, like, nobody could predict. Like, it was unpredictable to know how it would sound like 2 months later or 6 months later. And that's what I found is the beauty, was the beauty of the piece, that it was unpredictable. And this goes also back a little bit, looking into Cage's philosophy, about the unpredictability of certain kind of compositions of sounds and music. And so it was a combination of all this above, like first designing kinetic sculpture, but then you had this component as a musical element where you could compose. And so somehow this whole framework came together, where again, it was something for your eyes and for your ears.
We have a question that's come in via the chat here, and this is great. Someone is asking about the work that you've done since the film. Now, the film was produced in 2010, so we have 11 years, or 10 and a half years of work you've done at least since the film was shot. And they're wondering if you have any favorite pieces from recent years, maybe besides In C and besides the Piano House, other things you've done, because I know you've been very, very busy.
Well, there's a lot of different things in the meantime was going on. Like each project, each idea or each project takes about 2-3 years to complete everything. Like just the last project, like In C, took about 3 years. Of course, the pandemic kicked in another year, but usually I always have to plan ahead for about a 2-3 year developing time of the piece. because it's easy on a piece of paper to come up with a sketch, with an idea, with any kind of idea. But then when you start translating this sketch into the real kind of component, building the sculpture, building the instrument, then you will run into certain obstacles which you didn't see on the piece of paper. So it's also when you do some work, kinetic artwork, when you install it in a museum or in a gallery or in a public space, it has to run for a while, and it cannot just break down after the third day, because you really have to make sure all the components are tested and good enough so they would endure all this kind of abuses they have to do with the instrument itself. So there is not really a favored. There's so many pieces in the past. Right now, I'm actually working on since several years on a project. It's called the Cello Quartet. It's a piece for 3 autonomous cellos and 1 live cellist. And the autonomous cellos, they are actually prepared cellos. They are running, they are on wheels, so they are running on the stage around, smart enough, not bumping into each other, but each piano is prepared, like instead of a bow, one piano has actually a wooden saw cut into the piano with a wooden saw to make a certain kind of percussive sound and a percussive rhythm with a wooden saw. So each cello is prepared, but also they are moving while they are playing. So you are moving sound around. You give the sound another dimension, and this other dimension is space. So the space will be used at the same time while they are playing in different locations. So this is every time, like in C, like the piece at Caramoor, is since 2 days ago history for myself, because so after the opening, you can look forward for the next project, because you are done. And I know I'm not completely done. I'm still like to work on it, still like to improve certain things. But in a way, this is now, it's time to move on to the next project where I can concentrate to look into all these details which are necessary, that when this cello's running around on stage, and there are also dancers, there's a choreographer involved with a live cellist, and they're all interacting to each other using some technologies where the cellos, they're all wireless. It's a wireless MIDI system, so they can do whatever you send in real time to the cellos. So that's right now the project I'm concentrating on.
Someone in the chat is asking a question that was on my mind too, which is when will that piece finish, and where and when will it happen? When can we expect to see it?
Well, right now, through the pandemic, everything got kind of put on hold a little bit, because the grant writing, the collaborations with the dancers, with the choreographer, and everything got kind of right now being put on hold. So I don't know yet. I still have to do quite a bit of research. The instruments itself, the cellos, are existing. they're running on this hoverboard kind of devices, which I made my own hoverboard, but they are very precise to run on stage or just staying. And there's some other. Pardon?
No, I'm just saying, I imagine they have to be very, very precise. Other, especially if you have live dancers on stage, it seems like there's not a whole lot of margin for error.
Right, but there are certain kind of proximity sensors and other kind of electronics where they can actually follow a dancer with a certain with a certain color, like there are color scanners, and so certain cellos also interacting with the dancers, and they can identify the dancer. So all this right now is still work in progress, and I don't like to be rushed into a deadline. Of course, deadlines are always good because then you have to hurry up and finish it. But I still need quite some time to investigate all these kind of interactions and using these newer technologies to implement. So it could be something interesting for the audience, because then also the music, the cellist, the live cellist is also on a moving platform where the cellist constantly is changing the position, also rotating around in certain kind of speeds, where you get some kind of like a Leslie live cellist effect, because the cellist rotates around their own axis, and all this has to be rehearsed very well to make it actually happen on a live stage.
And maybe you said it, but where is that piece going to happen when it finally happens?
It's not yet determined. It will be probably connected to the National Performing Arts Network, so it could be performed in different cities at different times.
Okay, great. So maybe we'll get a chance to see it close to us. I want to just make sure we spend some time talking about the new piece here, about In C. It seems like there's a connection between this cello piece you've just been talking about and the piano house and In C, is that in all of these cases, you're building an instrument, you're first building an instrument, and then you're composing music with that instrument that kind of shows off what it does, or the composition itself becomes an investigation of the sound of the instrument. So when we started these conversations about In C 3 years ago, I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about your thought process in coming up with that one, and creating a new kind of instrument that you wanted to create.
Well, from the beginning, the challenge always with outdoor sculpture is the longevity, like you're dealing with weather and climate conditions. And this is always a big question mark when you use any moving parts, any kind of kinetic, electromechanical components, because when something has to be like a beater, a drum beater, for example, always has to be going back in the same position and then waiting until it gets the next signal. So all these components they have to be very precise. And to compose for an instrument like the In C, for me, it is important that I would have control over a little bit control over the dynamics and how fast I can play the repetition rate, how fast I can play the instrument, and how how it responds. So this means when something is outdoor, you really have to consider certain kind of limitation, because you want to make sure it runs for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And this way, it can be, after, of course, a certain time frame, certain parts can be replaced, but then it should be playing approximately the same like it was designed for. And so this is all a learning process. We don't know yet how INSEE sounds like in 20 years, but I think it can be very close what we hear today, when there is a certain kind of a maintenance done every several years, every 5, 8 years, to make sure all the components are in the right place, because the chimes itself, they don't change. And the chimes which we are using on the sculpture, they are about 100 years old. And they will still sound the same in another 100 years. But the electromechanical components who are activating the chimes with a hammer mechanism, this has to be eventually replaced to make sure the sculpture is playing the same in 20 years later.
We have a great question that just came through. Seeing as we're having all of the sound artwork that's being presented at Caramoor, and you now having made 2 installations for us at Caramoor, wondering if there's anything that you can reflect on about what makes Caramoor a special place for sound art to be.
Well, 7 years ago, I got this phone call from you, from Stephan Moore, Dr. Moore, and asking me to come to see this place, which I wasn't aware of Caramoor, and you told me that I should first come and see, and then I might start to think about what kind of piece I want to present as in a presentation. So as soon I arrived, I was really taken away by the beauty of the nature, by the beauty of the surroundings, just with the wildlife, listening to the birds, listening to the wind going through the trees and brushes, and the beautiful gardens, which are very well taken care of it, all the flowers, all the brushes, and everything. So it was just like I didn't expect being asked to do something in this beautiful environment, because like I didn't know what I was expecting. So immediately after being introduced to Caramoor, I knew something has to do including the nature, including the surroundings with the sound, and also like listening to the birds, and we know that birds, they have their own intonations, the birds singing their own sounds, and they are not particular in tune what we think what tuning is. Like the birds, they have their own tuning system, but it's still beautiful to us, even it's out of tune, but the birds singing just beautiful. So I want to do something where the birds, and actually the piano house, when I came back the second year, there were some other creatures living in the piano house, like raccoons, like squirrels, and of course birds, you know, like, and they probably enjoyed the sounds. So they didn't get scared away. So they made their home also in the piano house. And this was the beauty of the piece.
Great. Well, I see Kathy has rejoined us.
Hello. Yes, I just wanted to come back and thank you both, Trimpin and Stephan, for this talk, and Trimpin really for this incredible, wonderful piece that will now greet every visitor coming to Caramoor, called In C. It's really so special to us, and really has transformed Caramoor's appearance now, and I know we're going to have many, many years of visitors. So I encourage everyone who's within driving distance of Caramoor, and even some who aren't, get on a plane and come and see Trimpin's latest work, In C, at Caramoor, and all the other wonderful sound art that we have on the grounds each summer. So thank you both, and we will hope to see you again soon.
All right. Thank you, Trimpin.
Good night, everyone.
All right. Thank you. It was a real pleasure to participate in this Caramoor event. So I will be back.
We look forward to it.
Great.
All right.